So this afternoon, we're going to move into one of the more interesting discussions I don't know much about, which is open source intelligence. I actually think this is one of the most interesting, creative, potential fact-checking, operational, investigative kind of things, and that's as sophisticated as I get in this. I'm happy to introduce my colleague Clare Wang, who's going to facilitate the discussion. She's the Plant Moran EK S&H Faculty Fellow and a Professor of Accounting in the Center for Ethics and Social Responsibility Research Director at the University of Colorado Leeds School of Business. Her research examines roles that include legal, regulatory, and financial reporting regimes play in capital markets and corporate activities. And she also studies emerging forms of disclosure, such as corporate accountability reporting and social media platforms. It's my pleasure to introduce Clare.
Thank you, Alan. And as you know, I'm an academic accountant, and I love accounting. So if you ever hear people say accounting is boring, accounting is bookkeeping, AI is overtaking the accounting profession, from my perspective, that's all misinformation. So please, accounting is so much more. So please dispel those misconceptions for us. All right. But what I'm most excited about today is to introduce, I'm so glad to have this opportunity to facilitate the discussion with Dessi Lange-Damianova, and then she is, as you can see, the Chief Operating Officer at Bellingcat. And Bellingcat, yesterday was already mentioned multiple times. I counted at least 3. There might be more at the opening session, and then where the work with Ukraine is in Ukraine was mentioned. And then the second time, I think Gabby said it was one of the most trustworthy outlets that she knows out there. And of course, at the YouTube movie screen, Bellingcat was again mentioned. So, and then I have observed multiple people coming to Dessi and saying how aspiring their work is. So I'm so excited to introduce her, and I will let her tell you about herself and then what got her inspired to join Bellingcat as the number 6 employee, and then also in general what Bellingcat aims to do. So we'll start there. I will try to keep this as more of a dialogue conversation for about 20-25 minutes, and then leave 35 to 40 minutes for open Q&A.
Thank you, Claire, for the introduction. Thank you, Alan, for the invitation, and thank you, everyone, for being at this session. I'm really almost overwhelmed and grateful and honored that everyone finds our work so worthy of being also in this panel. So thank you for that. I will try my best to answer questions and to have a conversation that can shed a bit more light behind the scenes of Bellingcat, not only what is visible out there. A brief introduction about myself. We had a very nice chat yesterday. Indeed, I was employee number 6, or maybe 5 even. I joined almost 5 years ago, and my background is very diverse. I first started as a linguist studying Arabic in Syria when the country still existed. Then I moved into journalism, working as an investigative journalist, but also as editor. Then I moved into non-profit sector in media development, working with a lot of countries in the South, Global South, supporting setting up investigative journalistic programs, but also supporting individual journalists and media outlets. I did some work in forensic accounting, even though I'm not a certified accountant, and I can absolutely testify that accounting is anything but boring. On the contrary, and at some point there was a vacancy for a business director at Bellingcat, and at first I found it very strange because I was aware of the work of Bellingcat in my previous work. And the word business and Bellingcat in the first moment did not match for me. I wondered what they actually want with this function. And I very quickly realized that it would be a very exciting opportunity to basically build an organization around a group of volunteers that had a lot of impact without having an organization. Usually you have the reverse. You go into an organization with a lot of structures, processes, and then they, especially in the non-profit sector, and they're thinking about their impact And in my case, there was a lot of impact without any organization. So my role there has been to build an organization around the work of a couple of volunteers. At that time, we were 6-7 people when I joined in 2019, with a lot of volunteers, outside contributors, but the real team was 6-7 people, and now we are 35. 4 years later. So that's very brief about what I do. And now I'm dealing with financial, to set up all the structures, including financial fundraising and also compliance, because we are a non-profit registered in the Netherlands and additionally a charity. So there are a lot of things which we have to comply with. So that's in brief about me. Thank you.
Yeah. So you talked about societal impact, huge societal impact. What do you think is the biggest role you play? And then what do you view Bellingcat as a way to counteract the misinformation in the markets or in society in general?
So that's a very big question. And when we do our work, also at the start, we were not thinking like, okay, what kind of societal impact we can have. I mean, we just saw that with open source investigations, I would like to say here that we would prefer to use the word, we prefer to use investigations and not intelligence, because it's a little bit different. So at the start, the very first days of Bellingcat actually were discovering things which are on social media and basically corroborating the narrative which was visible on the traditional media. So, and then we discovered through our work the potential of these open source methods that can contribute to traditional journalism. So nowadays, we call ourselves a collective that was a pioneer in a way in 2014 for open source methods to be used as additional methods for traditional journalism. So a lot of media now see us as being the first ones to discover this potential, and we are also very happy that one of our first employees have now been hired by New York Times, by the BBC. So basically we have been some sort of an incubator for talent in that area. So we consider maybe that to be our modest contribution in the field of journalism, but also now we apply our methods in a lot of other fields in collaboration with other actors. So that is also contributing, we think, to society, we hope.
Can you expand on the Bellingcat method a little bit and talk about maybe briefly one famous case that you did? So for people who might not be familiar with Bellingcat. It can be the first one or it can be the most exciting, most cited one.
Maybe I can start with an example of what I think is one of our most prominent investigations, and from there explain the method. A lot of people associate Bellingcat with discoveries, very prominent discoveries about secret operations of Russia, state operations, the poisoning of Navalny, Skripal, MH17. However, we do much more than that. And for me, one of the most prominent investigations that we did last year is the following, if I can briefly explain, because I think it's very exemplary of the way we work as a collective, but also involving our community. So our investigators, staff investigators, people that are employed with Bellingcat, very few of them, probably 1 or 2, have background in journalism. So they come from all walks of life with all kinds of experiences and education, from different educations, with different expertise, with different experience in different fields. So one of our researchers who comes from educational background, he has a very keen interest in looking for how applications on internet are used to memorize languages, for example, Quizlet. So at some point he was looking into Quizlet and discovered an interesting pattern that triggered his further curiosity. So he discovered that usually Quizlet is used for people that learn new languages to memorize words. But he discovered a pattern that he saw a lot of data on Quizlet being numbers. So he thought like, to me that doesn't make a lot of sense, so I just want to dig further. So he started digging further, and then he saw more instances like this appearing on Quizlet, and then he found that the people using that did not have their privacy settings on closed but on open, and then he discovered the people behind, and then these were American soldiers. He found their profiles on Facebook because they were also open. And then what he discovered is that these American soldiers were using Quizlet to memorize codes of nuclear vaults in the Netherlands, where American nuclear weapons are based, also guarded. So this was everywhere on the internet for everyone to see. And this is not misinformation or disinformation. I mean, the intent was just to, use something to memorize very complicated or a lot of data. But so the investigation became bigger and bigger, and then what we found out was actually quite dangerous, because inadvertently, the codes, but also the places of the security cameras, and also the badges, and a lot of very, very highly sensitive security details were just like in the open internet. So we did the investigation, and before publishing, because this is like a big scoop, so we approached the Dutch Ministry of Defense and also the Pentagon and said, look, we have this information, what to do about this? So they were like really shocked that we could discover that in such a way. Also took us one investigator and like, I don't know, a month with very limited resources. So they had to change the codes. So this story, when we published it after the codes were changed, generated like an enormous also world coverage. It was even published in Kiribati and, I don't know, translated in so many languages. So this is just an illustration of what the potential of open source is. Not only to discover wrongdoing, but just how real curiosity, a combination of curiosity, freedom of our researchers to research what they are interested in, not being limited by time or by any assignment for something to research. Of course, it's maybe very simple, but there's a combination of things which actually describes or defines our method. So we use open source. We use open source to discover all kinds of things, and these things that we look at is either the specific interest of our researcher or something which our broader community, which is on Twitter, on Discord, on Twitch, give us as ideas. So this is also something which is different than traditional media. Sometimes we are we are not. Even though we were pioneer in establishing open source investigations as one of the methods in traditional journalism, we are not, we don't see ourselves as media outlet or traditional journalism because we involve the community.
So this leads to my next question is, well, how do you actually select projects? And then does that relate to how you're funded? Or how, the two pieces of it? Or how do you
You mean how we select what to investigate?
Yes.
So,
and also the funding structure, how does that impact your project selection?
Yeah. So the selection is, we don't have an editorial meeting once a week and then, discuss like, hey, what's out there, what shall we discover? All of our researchers have a lot of freedom to look into their area of interest or to just see what is happening on Discord and on Twitter. We try to have a little bit of more managed communities. So every day also our researchers, they research areas which is of their interest. I will talk about Ukraine separately because it's a separate case, but they also just pick up signals from what is out there in the bigger open source community which we have tried to develop. So once there's an idea in which they find interesting, which relates to an event which could be of public interest or a discovery of a fact that can inform a public discussion. So it's not also just completely random, something very small, but something which could potentially be of public interest. So this combination of freedom of our researchers, their own areas of interest, plus what is happening or being discussed in this managed community which we have, then we decide what to investigate. So that's one thing. The other thing is we have the luxury to have a lot of time and a lot of freedom in how long it takes us to do an investigation and to do a publication. Luckily, and I say luxury and luckily also because we are not, we don't work with advertising, we don't work with government funding, we don't work on assignment. We never accept funding which is very much linked to a specific investigation or specific area that we have to discover, even though there's a lot of offer, but we say actually quite a lot no than yes. So this gives us the freedom to investigate what we think is interesting. Of course, next to that, we try to build a lot of partnerships with a lot of organizations from different fields. They can be media organizations, they can be human rights organizations, they can be academic organizations, they can be individuals, either students or researchers or citizen journalists. And then through these partnerships also we try to help them. We do have sometimes do investigations with a traditional media organization if they ask us to do so. And in that case, where they use more traditional sources of information, we can only do it if we can corroborate their source of information, which can be closed with open source. That is the exception that we make. So there's no one answer, to your question, how we pick investigations. But yeah, we have a lot of freedom in that.
You have understood. So there's a lot of freedom in picking. Some of them come from investigators' own interest, public interest, or just when you sniff something's not right, and then you further investigate.
Yeah.
Okay. And then...
so we crowdsource also ideas. I mean, we crowdsource investigations, but we also crowdsource ideas for investigations.
So as an accounting academic, like this idea of crowdsourcing information, and then reminds me a lot of, currently there are short sellers and people in the stock market who are also trying to crowdsource information by using sorting through millions of pages of corporate registry and such, and then they are, and then they make a short attack. And then so ideally these actors often say that, hey, they're doing a public good in the sense that these are dishonest companies and I need to make it known, okay, so that I break this scandal. But at the same time, there are also private gains, right? Like this morning we talked about the economic gains from misinformation. There's gonna be economic gains to be made. And then so in that sense, do you think using the Bellingcat method, using open source intelligence investigation, do you see a conflict between doing a public good versus a private gain?
Well, first of all, we don't want, as Bellingcat, to take a high moral ground or to do any judgment, on what others, how they use open source data. That we try to keep it, within the way we use open source. And public interest, of course, you can define it in a number of ways, but for us, what is important is how we contribute to this public interest, because you can have different definitions, but then what the difference is how somebody contributes to that public interest. So in our goals, that's why we have decided, actually, it's a choice not to be a company, but to be for non-profit, and also a charity. So this choice means that our purpose in what we do is we want to use our skills to contribute to public good in our area, using open source to discover wrongdoing or to discover facts which can help, on further investigation or uncover crimes or shed light on, war crimes or human rights abuses. So for us, The purpose of doing this is when we scrape data or when we do financial investigations, we can also genuinely say our purpose is to contribute to discovery of more facts. Our purpose is not to make private gain, because we can also actually prove it. We are a non-profit and a charity. We are not allowed to make profit. And if other people want to make profit in a legal way, that's why we don't want to comment on if this is their livelihood, as long as they do it responsibly. So this is a big question also, how to use data responsibly. For us, it's important.
Yeah. So it's a good time to segue into, do you think there are bigger ethical issues that you encounter now in general in open source, investigation? In the sense that comparing to, I would just think about one example I can think of is like in traditional media, when you do traditional journal, they are aware that some sources are taking personal risks when they reveal themselves and talk to the traditional journalists. But in open source investigation, intelligence, witnesses may not be aware that they're being put in this open source. They might not. Informed consent kind of meant very different. Mm-hmm. So do you have any thoughts on that? Or it could be in general also, just what are some ethical considerations that are different in the open source environment?
So again, I would like to talk about how we approach ethics as Bellingcat, and it goes on a number of levels. 2 years ago, I think we established internally something which we called ethics board. And in this board, we have investigators, we have our editors, we have the fundraiser, we have me, and we have the training administrator and the financial administrator. So within this ethics board, we discuss everything from whether to publish an investigation which might be completed already. So there's a lot of investment in time, and we know all the facts are authenticated, but still there might be an ethical consideration not to publish this article in the end, or give the investigation to somebody else to publish. Then we also discuss ethics of every donation above 5,000 euro that we receive with this whole ethics board, and that's why we involve not just the fundraiser and the financial person, but also the investigators. Maybe they have other considerations not to accept this funding, because we want to be very clear that we don't want strings attached. That is how we also, it's a very important part of our business model. When we accept donations, we are very clear from the beginning, thank you very much, and we are very grateful for any donation from €1 to whatever, but no strings attached. We want to have our independence in terms of what we investigate and how we publish. We also discuss ethics indeed on partnerships. If an organization comes to us, whether it's, I don't know, a media organization or a human rights organization or a research institute that want to work with us, we also consider whether we look at it from ethical point of view. But one example, concrete example on ethics now with, and also your question, like, do you, even if the source is authenticated, do you disclose it still? Because then it's ethical use of data. In the case of Ukraine, where Bellingcat has done a lot of work to authenticate and to collect and to preserve and to analyze cases of civilian harm, sometimes a digital data or digital fact is the only witness of a crime. And now that we also teach our methods to everyone, sometimes it's very easy, and it takes just a couple of minutes for the bad actors to discover where the witness has been filming a war crime, which constitutes war crime or civilian harm. So that is why we are also thinking twice. If we disclose this, we might inadvertently jeopardize the person who has shared this information with us. And this is something which we try to consider more and more. And again, we are in a luxury position where, for us, speed is not important. We don't want to be the first or the only one to, we rather take time to consider all possible implications even if we disclose that, what it could mean for the source of information before we decide to publish. So this is something we call internally slow journalism, like slow food. We call it slow investigation and slow journalism, and that is how we would like to work, and that is how also we build trust, we hope, with those reading us.
Yeah. So before the talk, Dessi was just showing me the moral compass of Bellingcat. If you're interested, you can look online, and it has all these different angles on integrity and diversity, equality, trust. So you can take a look. It's a very interesting compass. So at this point, I have one last question, and then we'll move into Q&A. So please get your questions in. And so one last thing I would like to ask before moving on to Q&A would be, is Bellingcat itself susceptible to disinformation? How do you deal with that?
Yes, we are, because I think everyone at some point in their life, individuals, organizations, systems, governments, societies, countries are susceptible to disinformation, and we also, of course, it would not be truthful if I say we were never susceptible to disinformation or misinformation. So what we can do is just try our best, do our best. So when we work with contributors or volunteers, or when we organize trainings, we try to vet all participants, as much as possible. When we work with, indeed, volunteers that want to contribute to an investigation with us, we try to vet them to see also their motives, and of course, to authenticate what they're giving us as additional information, but it's a process. It's all the time, and it costs a lot of time and a lot of effort. Mm-hmm. But we are also very realistic that there are actors trying to, penetrate our systems or our organization or the way we work, and also to discredit our reputation, because we are still a very small organization with very limited resources, and the only thing we have, is our credibility and reliability, and it takes just one small mistake that everything crashes down, and for us this is really, really very important. I mean, that's why we, in terms of also transparency, we're trying to be radically transparent, like to the level of where we publish also the salaries of our top management, for example. And this is something which also helps us get resources from funders and from individuals, because if we talk about transparency in our research and in our investigations, where every investigation we publish, next to that, we publish the whole method, how we did this investigation, step 1 to step 10, and so that everyone can reconstruct all the steps and see if the conclusions that we have reached are the same when everyone, reconstruct the steps. But this transparency also means that we want to behave internally in the same way, because that's how you build trust. Without full transparency, you cannot build trust.
Absolutely. So at this point, then we'll move to open Q&A. If anyone have questions, I think we have mic runners. There's a couple there in the back.
Hi, Margie Murphy from Bloomberg News. How many investigations has Bellingcat gone through, then taken through the kind of ethical questioning process that you mentioned, and then decided not to publish? And what would constitute an unethical investigation, hypothetically?
I'll try to answer the question from my position. I'm not an editor, I'm not an investigator, but of course I'm aware of if let's say if we have data which has been obtained in a non-open source way, but then has been put on the internet, we sometimes have to consider whether we want to work with this data because it is not truly open source. So we have had a couple of investigations last year that we have not published, and we have not proceeded even with the investigations because of that. Another case would be if a data is authenticated, but we consider it not responsible use because it may do more harm to the person or persons involved, directly or indirectly, then it will do good by disclosing it. So this, last year we had 2 cases where we did not publish investigations because they were considered more harmful than beneficial. But it's a constant discussion. I mean, there's no 1 or 2 answers. It's very difficult because sometimes you have to weigh, okay, what is the public interest, the bigger public interest, but what is also the interest of the person or persons, you know, having this information or disclosing this information. Yeah, it's very difficult. Every time we have to take these decisions, our editor and investigators sometimes have to discuss literally weeks on end. And yeah, that's how we operate. But again, we are able to do that because we are not obliged, you know, to publish every day. And speed for us is not an issue, luckily, for now.
Is it me?
Yeah.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much for this panel. I'm Gabby Stern from WHO, and I wanted to say thank you, to Elliot, to Ed, and the whole team at Bellingcat. You do incredibly important work. And just 2 questions in the form of a comment. I would love to see Bellingcat do more investigations in other parts of the world than where you tend to focus. And what is it, a funding issue or is it a capacity issue? Because there are so many incredible, troubling situations going on in many other countries, but I'm sure you're limited in resources, or maybe your portfolio is somewhat geographically limited. Maybe you've made that decision, which is fine. The other one is I would love to see you do more on more financial, business, commercial type investigations, given the huge influence that, that various parts of the private sector have on political, geopolitical, and many other things that surround us. Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. Yeah, so the answer to the first question in very short is yes. This is something which we started 2 years ago, looking in other areas, geographical areas, but also other topics than Russia and Ukraine. In our new strategy, we want to focus on Latin America and Africa, open source investigations in those regions. Primarily as a first step by building partnerships, you know, with organizations there that are already doing open source or that want to learn our methods through training or through joint projects. So Latin America and Africa are where we are looking for. In the Middle East, we published a couple of prominent investigations on the United Arab Emirates. We have worked a lot in the past on Yemen. So it's not a funding issue. Luckily, we want to put our resources where our work is most needed. Indeed, we are trying to open other areas because we think also in Europe and in the US, you know, there's quite a lot of already others doing what we do, which is very nice to see. And that's why we want to move in areas where our expertise is more necessary. The second question, financial investigations, yes, we want to look at that also. Currently, we have only 2 investigators that are specialized in that area, and this is something where we want to put more resources. As we speak, we will be hiring 2 more researchers with expertise in financial investigations as of next month. So we hope this team will grow also. I hope this answers your questions. Then we are finished.
Here, Emma. Oh. I think, do we need a mic?
You, like, well, not maybe you personally, but Bellingcat, like many other organizations that do, powerful research on disinformation and exposing human rights abuses and so on, have been subjected to a lot of misinformation about your organization and trolling and attacks. And I was wondering what measures you take to protect the people in your organization. I know you talked about transparency, actually that's a really important one, but is there anything else that you've done and put into place in order to tackle these, both the misconceptions and misunderstandings, but also potentially threats to your staff and anybody involved in Bellingcat and the organization itself?
Yeah, thank you. So we have taken several measures already a couple of years ago in that area. So how to protect our staff and also those that are involved with our work. It's very difficult to have physical protections because we are distributed, so we are in many countries. That's also in a way protection because there's no concentration in one place, so it's more difficult for physical targeting of our people. So that's something, and then we have programs and also trainings, in physical security, how to, in some situations, we also have a bit more regular physical protection of our most prominent staff members. Next to that, we have hired 2 years ago in-house safety and security officer that is constantly dealing with, digital protection and safety and security, how we work with data, how we communicate, what equipment we use, how to make sure that we work as safe as possible. On the other hand, we cannot be anonymous. We don't want to be anonymous. That's not possible because otherwise, it doesn't match with the full transparency. And we are aware of the risks, and we discuss that constantly, safety and security. But also, from a psychological point of view, we have started having mental health programs for our staff because there's a lot of there's a lot of hate speech towards them personally, for the whole organization also, but also personally, and the way you deal with, even though that's not true, it is very difficult to disconnect, and some people can do it better than others. So we have started offering mental health sessions on a regular basis to all our staff that want to do that. And also we have coaching sessions and we help each other. So we talk about this constantly to be able to contribute, as much as we can. Of course, we also discuss, what's common sense. There's a lot of disinformation there against the organization that we are funded by CIA, by MI6, that's why we publish. It also feeds back to the question of transparency. In terms of compliance, we are obliged as a charity, as a non-profit in the Netherlands, to publish cumulative financial accounts every year, which other similar organizations publish their 2 or 3 pages. We publish on our website all 38 pages, all of them, with real breakdown of everything we spent every cent on. So that is also a way to just, push back against claims like you're funded by the CIA or by this or by that. It's a combination of things, but we take security and safety also digitally more and more. Of course, we take it very, very seriously, and we try to, as I said, we have very regular trainings also in digital security, and we are very grateful actually to donors and individuals that want to support also especially the mental health program, because sometimes it is very, it's not, hopefully now and in the future it will become more common, but this is a kind of a neglected area, you know, and this happens a lot, especially because we have to deal our researchers with very graphic material constantly, and this is very problematic sometimes for their own mental health.
Joachim Gassen, Humboldt University, and I'm also a member of a research network called Accounting for Transparency, and there we have an open science data center, and that motivates my question now. So I was excited to hear that you're also interested in studying financial aspects more, and I have one question / remark for you in that regard. We talked this morning also about who profits from disinformation, and we talked about the challenges to get, let's say, corporate level data and detailed data on money flows and financial flows, and that the European Union is a little bit better off in that regard when it comes to data availability compared to large parts of the rest of the world. I'm a little bit skeptical about this point because there are several institutions that, while the data is technically available, they make it, they try to use everything they have in their weaponry to make, let's say, automated parsing and processing of their data hard for researchers. And my question is that something that you also encounter, so that data is hard to achieve, although technically it should be in the public domain? And are you actually interacting with other players in this space to lobby towards more transparency also from the regulator perspective, so that, for example, the ultimate owner data in Europe becomes available, and also the financial statement data? Is that something that you would be interested in?
Thank you for the question. I will start from backwards. For us, it is very important, and we always want to be crystal clear there. We are not an advocacy organization, and we don't want to be involved in any lobbying. So we just want to do what we are supposed to do, namely investigations. And if somebody else, on the basis of our investigations, wants to do policy change or recommendations or anything else, fine. But we don't want to go there, because then we enter into a discussion about neutrality and everything else. So we stop here, and then if someone wants to take over, we will do our best to help, but this is not our role. That's one. Secondly, 2.5 years ago, we decided to establish within our research team investigative tech team, so that we hire data scientists, software developers, specialists in that area to develop tools which can make this kind of research easier, not just for our own researchers when they do investigations, but also for the wider open source community, and not just open source community, but anyone who wants to use, open source tools in their respective fields of work. And we share that freely, guides and tools and everything on our website. And indeed, we have dedicated funding for that area to be able to develop investigative tools ourselves as well. And we are actually very honored and happy that we have even people that have left very high-paying jobs in Silicon Valley to come and work for us, data scientists, software developers, and that's actually amazing to see, because we really have a purpose, and we can also show that we work for that purpose. I think that's it. Thank you.
Oh, let me follow up on that, because yes, we had a...
I think the gentleman there had the question.
Okay. Come here.
Thank you. My name is Ira Young from the University of British Columbia. You mentioned that you might be reluctant to publish data if it can cause more harm to individuals. Do you also have similar ethical concerns about the methods that you publish? For example, if citizen journalists try to imitate the methods, but they misuse those methods to implicate or incorrectly accuse people of crimes. Are there any concerns about that with, publishing the methods?
Yeah, that's a very good question. We constantly have this concern because on the one hand, our objective as an organization is to share our knowledge and to share our methods and to train, individuals, organizations, everyone who wants to learn these methods. Of course, we also know that by that, we help those that need it, but we also help those that want to use it for the reverse reason. It's very difficult also to, to combine this openness with restricting. When we publish our methods, we always say, look, we want them to be used in a responsible way. That is also why we have, even though we are not a traditional media organization, we abide by, editorial and ethical standards and practices, and they're on our website, especially with emphasis on responsible use of data and responsible use of methods. We think constantly about that, but then what can you do? It's not easy. I mean, I would be untruthful if I say, yes, we make sure that this does not happen, but we know that it happens. So we hope that more good actors will use our methods than bad, and at some point the balance will be in that. But yeah, it is inevitable sometimes. We cannot also monitor. The only thing we can do is be very open to everyone that these methods that we teach everyone can also be used by bad actors. So we try to make people aware to be alert about those methods being used actually to create more disinformation or to harm somebody else, because that's what you can do, otherwise it's outside of your control. We don't have the possibility, and that's also not our role, to monitor how those methods are used, unfortunately.
This word bad actor reminds me of this question, in the sense that in regulation, there's always this talk about there's a whack-a-mole or whack-a-mole approach to regulation, where something goes wrong, you regulate, but then bad actors just move into unregulated areas. So in this open source intelligence or open source investigation, now that the bad actors knows there's capabilities of, Bellingcat and the like that is able to use things on the open source, would they then move to closed ends, like closed source, closed internet? In this sense, are we having a risk of an open society kind of missing out on something that we needed most in open source precisely because they moved it off, that they see there's this risk on the open end?
We have had these discussions like, okay, what if because we are teaching everyone how to use, how to protect also their information with the result then that some people will start to protect their information more, or actors, individuals, organizations. However, we don't think that there will be still enough in the open internet that we can work with, luckily. It will be more difficult, and I think for us what is important is that we form more collaborations, because competition nowadays in this area especially is not helping. We think not helping, it's more damaging than helpful. So for us, these are questions that not really, we are not busy with them every day, in the sense that, do we have enough sources to work with? If the internet is closing, we think that that's not going to happen very quickly. There still will be a lot that we can work with. It will take, though, more time and possibly more resources, because then you would need, if now we use 20 or 15 sources to compile sufficient data, sufficient amount of facts, to authenticate something, then we might need to do 30. So it will cost more time, but we are not really considering that as a worry or a challenge at the moment.
Understood. Yeah. So, okay. Yes, please.
Hi, hello. My name is Peter Munford, and I work for a consultancy called Hacklet. Firstly, thanks, like everyone else has said, for the work that you do, which is very important. You've talked about your tools and techniques. I'm wondering how much of your success is down to the human creativity of your staff, is point one. And secondly, will that change with the developments in AI that we've been hearing about?
Yeah. A lot of our most prominent investigations are a result of indeed the creativity or curiosity or sometimes pure luck of the specific researcher or somebody in our bigger community, as I said, Discord, Twitch, Twitter, you know, people that have ideas. So that is indeed quite a significant part of our success is that. And that's what we try to nurture further. So that is why our funding model is based on the premises that we want to be able to continue giving freedom for this creativity to grow. Not just of our researchers, but also those colleagues, as I mentioned, from the investigative tech teams that develop tools. So that's one, and we hope to be able to continue doing that. And secondly, about AI, yes, we are worried, of course, about AI. And we had two situations in the recent months where our founder used AI to generate photos of Trump being arrested, and then he just put it on Twitter just as a test how many people will fall for the trap. And unfortunately, a lot of people believe that that's true because they thought, oh, this is Bellingcat, you know, it's an authoritative source, so it must be true. And his point was, you should question everything, also Bellingcat, because we can also make mistakes. So that is something which is very worrying, not just in terms of technology and how it will spread, but also how people consume it and how people react to that without actually, you know, without taking the time to consider, whether it's true or not. And so this is a worry for us constantly. How to, and also in our work, we are trying now to also move more towards not just developing training and giving training to individuals or organizations or anyone who is interested in open source, but also develop. We are developing modules for younger people, namely in secondary schools, how they can use our methods to build a bit more. We call it media wisdom because we don't want to use media literacy, because for us literacy is also some sort of a technical understanding, you know, how you deal with media and how you understand media, but wisdom is a little bit, it needs a bit more attention, and this is what we also are trying to work now with high schools and universities, also in the UK, in Europe, but also in the US and in Latin America. So. But it's a very long road, and it needs a lot of attention and resources. And yeah, for the moment, we do what we can.
Okay, I think that's perfect. And I want to thank you for Dessi again to joining us and then telling us about Bellingcat. And then, well, if you're interested, there's also a book and then 2 movies about Bellingcat. So, and then also she's here, you know, for the rest of the conference. So if you're interested, please give a round of applause to Dessi again.